Right, well, welcome everybody. If you are new to us, welcome to this briefing webcast. I'm Richard Brent, the head of content and editor-in-chief at Briefing, which is the publication and the events portfolio as well for leaders like yourselves working in large law firms and seeking to share perspectives and pick up practical insights on all manner of topics connected to smarter legal business management. That's our remit. We turned 13 actually this summer, and Briefing, since the pandemic, has been a very handy app that you can hop over to your app store of choice and download. Just look for the light blue and white Briefing icon, and you can find all of our content, our regular editions and our research and reports in there, free to consume. We regularly feature lots of deep dive interviews along the lines of the conversations that I'm going to be having with my guests for this webcast today, as well as opinion on different perspectives on the latest business trends, and also specific case studies on transformation projects and priorities. And one example of our research strand is the Briefing Frontiers research, which we publish every year. We poll senior strategic leaders across functions on all sorts of matters connected to the intersection between technology and wider strategy. So as I say, that was the latest issue of that was released in February and is also there in the app. Now, we do like these webcasts to be as interactive as possible. We'd love to hear from you as the conversations unfold. I have got plenty of time allotted later on for those questions, or indeed for you to share your own perspectives on what you're hearing, your own challenges, whether they be similar or very different. And we've got the Q&A here to obviously facilitate that. You can add your questions there at any time, and I'll take them on with the speakers in due course. So the topic today is how does your data value grow? And the idea for this flows on from the research that I just mentioned, Briefing Frontiers. This year we asked a new question. Some questions we ask year on year to get some tracking, and sometimes as a result of conversations that the team is having throughout the year, we see potential for polling on something new. And this year, we asked for the first time, does your firm have a business-wide data strategy? And the result that came back was that 2/5 told us that they either didn't have something that they could define as that, or they just didn't know. And these are, as I say, senior strategic and operational leaders. However, almost 4/5 knew that they would need something like that within 3 years. We thought that was pretty interesting. And then when we spoke to the people behind, the people who had answered our questions in some more detail, one thing that emerged was that maybe it wouldn't be something like a strategy document per se, but maybe firms might be thinking more along the lines of their data maturity, something that is more evolving and that allows them to sort of benchmark at regular intervals how they're progressing based on both internal and external factors. So today we're talking data maturity, and I've got three different speakers who I'm going to be speaking to. We've got Chris Lewis, who is Head of Data and Insight at DAC Beachcroft. We also will later speak to Martin Stockdale, who is the partner responsible for data transformation strategy at Kennedy's. And this webcast is in partnership with Katchr, and we're going to be joined later on by Graham Moore, who is the managing director and founder of that business, a business that is all about law firm performance management and what more law firms can do with the data that is either at their disposal or that they might want to acquire. So I'm going to start with Chris. Your firm has, I know we've spoken before, your firm's been on a business improvement drive over a couple of years now, possibly as part of a 5-year strategy, I think, on data being a key pillar of that. Can you tell us a little bit about the steps that you've specifically taken to help your people internally, first of all, extract more value from the data journey?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Richard, and morning, everybody. So our data strategy has been focusing on three main areas. So, and this is a journey we're still in the middle of. It's not something that I consider finished at any point. The three main areas are, number one, accessible, making the data we have accessible and ensuring that it's as trustworthy and as explainable as it can be. And then two, working towards an empowered data literate workforce. And three, the delivery of a centralized analytics platform. So a platform where 80% of our analytical needs can be gained from, with 20% then being for kind of niche individual products. So thinking about our people and how they can make better use of the data in their work, we've been aiming to continually build and monitor the skills that we have in our company. So not just our data professionals, so our analysts, but also our solicitors, our lawyers. So we've introduced training for our solicitors to help them to read data, interpret, work with data, and eventually, hopefully, argue with data as well. And for our data professionals that we have now embedded within different practice areas within our company, there is the option to start a data diploma as well. So people whose main job would be working with data, analyzing large quantities of data, we have a standardized diploma that they can pick up and work with.
Thanks very much. So what does the data training comprise, that diploma or the other training that you mentioned earlier? What are the practicalities of that for them?
So we've so for example, we use Katchr as our business intelligence tool within the company, and we have signed up to the continuous classroom learning portal, and we have identified modules of that course that can then be packaged up. We partnered with Learning Development to put that within our learning portal, so our employees are able to log into their training portal where they would do all of their regulatory training that they need to do, but also be able to subscribe to different modules depending on their needs. So looking at some very basic modules about how to navigate ClickSense or how to interpret charts, which chart to use for certain data types, through to a lot more advanced stuff, which is actually how to create content themselves or to create data stories. So using the analysis that is there out of the box, but then taking it away, adding narratives and creating kind of created reports, mixing the qualitative and the quantitative. And then the data diploma. So for our data professionals, this is like standardizing the tools that people are using, standardizing like how we make sure that everyone does the same course, make sure that we can create that kind of community of data professionals within our company. I am part of a central team, but I see it as being a network of data professionals. And if we all do the same training, the same learning, we can speak the same language to each other and bring us all on the same pathway.
And since you started doing that, what sort of effects have you seen in terms of how these different people who now have access to, well, are developing their skills and therefore have access to different capabilities? What difference is that making to the firm or their own jobs?
Sure. So for me, it's all about empowerment. So I've mentioned we have analysts now embedded in most of the practice areas of our firm. And with the combination of that trustworthy data that's accessible to them, they're then empowered to make impactful decisions and in some cases even generate new data-driven products themselves. So historically, I think, we would be working with our business users where they might come with a request and we would do the whole end-to-end development within IT itself, which is okay, but obviously within IT, we don't always have all the specialist knowledge for every single area of the business. So there will be an element of back and forth and a lot of, potential going down the wrong path to try and meet the business requirements. But by empowering the people embedded within the practice areas who have that specialist knowledge, we are able to generate new ideas more quickly. And then my team as a central kind of group level are all around enabling. So making sure we enable people, we set the guardrails of how people should work, making sure that it's governed in a sensible and appropriate way, but actually empowering the end users to create those products themselves.
Thank you. I think you mentioned the word trustworthy at the beginning of your answer there.
Yeah.
To what extent is that sort of, trust in data a continuous challenge or a continuous sort of journey of improvement, and how does that look practically within the firm?
Yeah. So trust. So when I kind of refer to trustworthy, it's looking at things like, is the data is the data quality of a certain standard? Are we able to easily describe the lineage of that data? So where has it come from? Are our end users able to understand exactly where it's come from and what transformations it has been through? Also looking at timeliness of data as well. So how up to date is it? How accurate in terms of is it a real-time information? Is it from a particular month period, etc.? So it's that level of trustworthiness of data that we've been looking into, and I think it's an imperative, a never-ending challenge to keep that up to speed. We have a number of so like our team will be responsible for creating these data sets that can then be published. So we have like different standards of data sets that we will make available to people, and when it reaches to a certain level of trustworthiness, we will then kind of give it the gold tick that you can go away and use this, and it has like a data dictionary assigned to it, which will allow the end users to understand exactly where that data is coming from and what's happened to it.
Thank you. Can we talk a little bit about the connection between the data strategy and client service? How are you looking to improve or change the way that your lawyers or others deliver services to clients with more advanced data?
Sure. It's a very fast-moving rate of change in this area, I would say. So I've been at DAC now 10 years, more or less, and early on there was, most of our interaction with the clients was providing them with the regulatory reporting that they required each month, and then didn't go much further for that. But now we're finding that all of our clients expect a lot more in value-added services, especially in addition to legal, what we can offer them in terms of data. Now, one way that we've managed to kind of provide that value-added service is over the years we've developed an internal MI system, I suppose. So in addition to data that's captured via our CMS or a PMS, we have extra data that is gleaned from various methods, and we capture a lot more information than what our clients would traditionally ask for. So we've been using like that aforementioned strategies like a central analytics platform and empowered workforce to actually start to open up the data that we capture for our clients in a greater magnitude. So our generic data set that we capture for all clients, we can now make that available to them so they can see a greater level of information around their cases. In addition, we can then use our embedded analysts to create data stories I referred to earlier, to add narrative to that data. And we're seeing like a much more interactive dialogue with our clients around data. So a typical review session, quarterly review, will now have us being having a dashboard or a data story up on the screen, and we'll be able to actually discuss with them in real time extra things we're seeing in the data above and beyond the regulatory reporting. So that's like kind of a value added for our clients. But then in addition, in the service that we provide, we've developed over the years a number of tools now for the benefit of our lawyers and our business services staff. So incorporating data and visuals into day-to-day processes, such as things like know your opponent. So our solicitors will have access to a tool which will allow them to dig into likely behaviours of the claimant solicitors. And also another tool such as something we call Compass, which is looking at historical payments by injury, head of loss across the last 3-4 years to look at emerging trends in claimed versus paid amounts, for example. So our solicitors have that information at their hand, which they're then able to help strategize their case.
Okay. Thank you. Just coming back to my initial point about data maturity and sort of measuring it on and assessing it on an ongoing basis. Is that a concept that DAC Beachcroft, adopts? Is that something? Is that a model that you use?
Yeah, it's definitely something that I'm looking to introduce quite soon. It's not something we've done in the past, like a company-wide assessment of data literacy, for example, but it's definitely something that I see happening in the near future. So one of the areas, the key challenge that I have next in this space is, I mean, I referred to earlier about having these modules set up for, our employees to sign in to help interpret data. I think we need to go one step further. So look at one idea I've been having is to have like a company-wide assessment, which looks at sectioning our different data consumers in different areas. So you wouldn't just have a solicitor, for example, but you'd have people that then maybe could be treated maybe a data skeptic, that we know people like that exist, or someone maybe who's a data enthusiast, or someone who's already data literate, and then looking at having specialized training for those different areas. In addition, I think something's really important is a data-driven executive. So make sure that we have specific modules available for the execs, because I think everything needs to come from the top down to hold the team accountable to incorporate data into day-to-day processes and celebrate successes, things like that. So the next stage for us, I think, is tailoring our training for the different personality types as in addition to the job roles.
That's fascinating. Thanks so much, Chris. Thank you. I'm now going to bring you back a bit later, if that's all right,
Sure.
for some more general chat, but also going to have a conversation with Martin Stockdale. And I think I'm right in saying, Martin, hello.
Morning.
I think I'm right in saying that Kennedy has a relatively new data strategy in place. I know you appointed a head of data from I think outside the legal sector, isn't that right? Sort of he's coming into the legal sector for the first time.
That's correct. Yeah, I think we probably started developing our kind of rethinking around data from back in 2017.
Right.
But,
okay.
We kind of manifested that in a formal approach to create a data strategy, which we did in 2021-22. So to give a bit of background, going back to 2017, what we recognised was that we needed to work on solving and organising, etc. The sort of the capture to delivery of client data. That was kind of the driver for that. Clients were asking us for more data. They were asking us for to kind of talk to them in data, whether it be in management information for institutional clients, or whether it be for a little bit more insight into some of the problems that clients are having in their matters. And so what we started to do with responding to that client need was to develop the value of data and insight that we were able to drive on the matters that we were working on. So it kind of all started in that shape. We're kind of recognizing always that, I think many law firms will always recognize that they've been messing around with data and using data to drive their business in terms of tracking people's productivity, billing, performance management. Data has been performance driving lawyers for a long time. But what we were moving into now was a world in which we wanted to have more information about the actual matters that we were dealing with. So we've succeeded in establishing the importance of data in the mindset of partners and the wider business, again using the sort of the clients as the vehicle to drive that change of mindset. At which point we need to stand back and then take a more holistic view of the data across the organization. So beyond client and matter data, what data is used to drive our organization, what data is used through the different technologies that we want to use in our organization. And what we were starting to see was that the technologies across the organization created and managed their own data, and what we were having was lots of different data assets across the business, which created an inconsistency and a disorganization, if you like. So what we wanted to understand was how people are going to interact with data, how our organization is a system, and how IT capability drives that. what our data literacy requirements were and what the skills and the risk management issues needed to be addressed. And what that came to that conclusion was, like I said, is that having solved that data, that client need in the first instance, we then stood back and said, okay, there's now a bigger piece of work to do here, and that's what was the driver for change, if you like, around developing the data strategy, which we set about as a global data transformation strategy.
Okay. So in terms of that latest phase,
yeah,
establishing a broader data strategy, and going talking and looking at more areas than just the client element. Am I right in thinking that you came up with some core principles that all data activity needed to be assessed against from a sort of usability and risk perspective?
So yeah, that's exactly how we did it through a process of engagement. I think the head of data strategy and myself, we conducted, I think, over 160 different engagements, interviews, workshops across a short period of time, in which we drew out of the organisation on a global basis the problems and the issues that people were having with data. And what we found was that they manifested themselves in 9 data principles that if we were to put them in place and live by those principles, it would guide all of our behaviours towards data. And embedding these principles would allow us to deliver on strategic actions of the firm. So we tied those principles and also the data strategy back to the organisation's overall strategy. And that was couched in the basis of giving us as Chris was saying before, the opportunity to have reliable data, and with that reliable data to have the opportunity to monetize that data. When we say monetize the data, we don't mean selling the data. What we mean is converting that data into new products and services, being able to lean up our existing processes, minimize costs in the business, enabling transformation activity, which is right now across the legal industry, but certainly we have multiple transformation projects going on at Kennedy's at the moment, and overall just reducing risk and the cost of risk for our business. So these data principles, I won't list them all, but just to kind of give you a flavour of what we're talking about. We're talking about a primacy of data in the technology conversation and guidance as to how we use it. It's defining our approach to risk. It's recognizing user need and a focus on capturing data for a purpose rather than for the sake of it, and to always understand the purpose as to why we're doing something. Having data governance, responsibility and structures in our data, and guiding our approach to tooling, data tooling across the business.
Okay, thank you. What about your needs in terms of the data skills and expertise that presumably you're continuously sort of refreshing or looking for more expertise to bring into the firm? How is the data expertise structured? Where do the data experts sit, and how do they connect to the rest of the firm?
So we do have a centralized data transformation team, and their responsibilities around delivering the strategy and primarily the 33 implementation actions. So they're the custodians of the principles in the main, and we have, say, 33 implementation actions linked to each of the 9 principles, not 33 each, but 33 spread across 9 principles that are going to drive our first phase of activity as we then look to iterate the strategy and refresh the activities that we need to do. But what we also recognized was that we already did a lot of work and a lot of things with data. So we recognize that our data and data responsibility is distributed already across the organization, and with that was existing and new data expertise which is also distributed. And it's really the basis of the principles together with actually the skills matrix that we've also established that allows us to bind all of this together. So the skills matrix gives us expectations and standards for when we recruit data expertise in the business. It guides also or provides a progression pathway for data expertise within the business and gives them the opportunity to mature their own careers without necessarily expecting law firm based structured job title changes. They can see their own development, and that allows, and that sits across wherever we've got the data, and that data is whether it's in our innovation and our R&D space, whether it's in our Kennedy's IQ technology business, whether it's both here or in the UK or in our Kerala-based development function. All in all, we've got data expertise across business intelligence, finance, IT, risk and compliance, and even actually embedded in some of our legal service teams.
Okay, returning to that client driver that you mentioned at the start, and maybe just reference Kennedy's IQ as well, which of course is trying to help clients to do more for themselves. That's right, isn't it? Well, and potentially use
less, yeah.
Less is your line. So can you tell us a little bit more about how the data strategy touches that part of the business? What are you trying to do differently for clients with your data and the strategy surrounding it?
So fundamentally, I guess the most direct application, well, the two applications I think that the data strategy has in terms of the relationship with Kennedy's IQ. Kennedy's IQ is its own separate business, and it operates within the wider Kennedy's infrastructure, but within its own areas, if you like. What we've done is, first of all, the skills matrix has been adopted by Kennedy's IQ in the way that they recruit. So it's a kind of they've taken the benefit of that. If we are also able to generate more insight through data, with our expertise on the legal side of things, then that will feed into the development of future products. I don't mean that the data is then taken from the LLP and we build products with the data. That's not the case, but certainly the insight of what we're able to learn, and that the ideas that are able to stem future ideas for products for Kennedy's IQ can start through that. And that's because we're able to have a more coherent conversation with data and insight on the LLP side, if you like. But equally, the data transformation team are ostensibly like a consultancy to Kennedy's IQ, for some of the principles around governance, some of the work we're doing around organizing our data is something, skill sets and approaches which Kennedy's IQ have adopted. And equally, that's exactly the same happens in reverse. Having a data science function and a development function developing SaaS products does change the mindset of the law firm. It changes the expectation in terms of our own users and also of our clients as to what the technology and innovation conversation is with the lawyers as well as with the tech company. So I think that it creates I'm going to say a friendly arms race. It's probably a bad way of describing it, but you can sort of see how one enables the other, if you like, to sort of perform better in relation to its core areas of focus, one on technology and innovation, one on delivering legal service.
Makes sense, thank you. What are the biggest wins that you've seen since you've been embarking on this? And that could either be specifics or organizational development. What stands out to you as having had the biggest impact on the firm?
I think the way in which we make decisions is starting to change. I certainly see that. The ease at which the firm adopted and the premise that every business case should not only need to make financial sense, but also needed to meet the standards set by the data principles and the adherence to them. So now there is actually a formalization of that through any project that goes for approval in the firm where it touches data needs to pass an assessment by the data team as well. And that's a big mind shift and a mindset shift. What I enjoyed seeing that was really just the way in which it seemed to just make sense to decision makers who were asked to change the way in which decisions were going to be made, and there was a frictionless adoption of that. And that was really pleasing to sort of see that really it gave a lot of confidence to those involved in the data transformation agenda that actually that they were making sense to the business and that they were being listened to. And I think that's a huge standout success from my perspective, especially so early on in this process. I think also the general sense of empowerment and engagement across the business. Like I said before, we've distributed the expertise, the data expertise is distributed across the business, and what we're starting to see now is that that expertise is starting now to come together in kind of communities and engagement and conversation, and they're helping each other solve problems that are common to each other. Whereas I think so it's breaking down silos in the business that would have naturally happened because they're over there doing their bit and I'm over here doing my bit, and they're different, aren't they? The data principles give you that common language, and I'm starting to sort of see and some of the first wins, if you like, of people using the data strategy and the principles were achieved in our HR function. You know, they immediately started to do things and, you know, embraced it, understood what they were trying to do through the context of a different lens, and succeeded in reorganizing data and representing data back to the business that was really interesting. So it's seeing that enablement rather than sort of some sort of concentrated activity happening in a dark corner somewhere else. And of course, on top of that, our client relationships continue to blossom. Clients appreciate for the same things that Chris was talking about. It's the same ability to deliver insight, not just sort of supply chain management, if you like, aspects of data. That's been continues to be a standout success.
Thanks, Martin. Just out of interest, those communities that you mentioned that have sort of formed, is that quite an organic process, or is that something that's been
organic? Definitely organic. Yeah, we haven't needed to make any sort of formalization of that. It's and that in itself, I think, helps drive. It's the old, you can lead a horse to water conversation. So when the horse decides for itself that it's going to drink, then you're pleased, and I think that's exactly what we're seeing.
Okay, thank you. And just before I ask you my final question, just going to remind people watching, if these conversations, I'm sure they have, provoked any questions, do let us know. Just pop them in the chat there, and I'll be surfacing them shortly. Martin, just before I bring Chris back, I'm going to ask you the same question I asked him at the end. Do you, and if so, how do you sort of assess your data maturity against, say, what other businesses or other firms or what else is going on out in the world is doing? Is that a process that you recognize and use?
Yeah, so there is a self-assessment process for our data maturity, and that is based on a series of workshops and wide engagement across the business, where there is robust and discussion and frankness. People who perceive in their areas that we're quite mature in one aspect are then accept the fact that perhaps just because we excel in one small area of the business, that actually perhaps our maturity in that overall area is actually quite low, because actually it applies nowhere else. They've developed that by themselves in their own silo, and actually it's that recognition. So that frankness of discussion has been useful, actually, by getting to a place where we understand the global nature of Kennedy's from a data maturity perspective, not just whether BD have got a great database around client contacts, for example. If that isn't mirrored everywhere else, then our maturity remains low, and actually people have got to get up to we've got to help grow the maturity of the business across all areas. But we then sense check that through external maturity assessments. But given our own maturity assessment is the depth that we undertake that review, and the amount of work we put into that, we recognize that ours is probably more reliable. It's usually more critical. We're usually more self-critical than external organizations. So that's the one in which we baseline ourselves, and which will measure progress of the transformation agenda that we have.
Thank you, Martin. Really appreciate that. Excellent amount of detail. So thank you very much. I'm going to now bring back Chris from DAC Beachcroft, and also Graham from, as I mentioned, Katchr, who's a partner for the webcast, Graham Moore. And Katchr's whole mission is to enable firms to extract more value out of their data strategy continuously over time. And Graham, you've written about data maturity in briefing in the past, not too distant past. So can you give me a sense of what it means to you?
Yeah, thanks, Richard. So I think the key thing with data maturity is that organizations need to see it as a journey. And, you know, we all sort of hate that word, but actually there is no ultimate destination here. But there are levels to go through. And I think just assessing your own data maturity is a really good exercise for folks to work out where they're at the moment and work out what the realistic next steps are. Because, you know, depending on what your current situation is, there are a huge number of alternative ways to move forward. You know, this is an endless game essentially to play, and getting maximum value from your data across all that aspects of your business is, you know, is impossible essentially. But, you know, but there are huge numbers of wins, and it's identifying those quickest wins, the best place to start. And that's really what, you know, a maturity assessment is going to give you.
We talk quite a lot about progress, I suppose, but not so much about challenges. I'll start with you again, Graham. So what are the common, in your experience, sort of blockers that stop a firm, you know, progressing from one stage of maturity to the next? Or, you know, are they common to firms, or are they different amongst them?
I think probably the most common challenge across all legal services organisations is, I'll correct myself there, not across all, but across a significant number, and this is where we see huge challenges, is that it's not necessarily driven from the top. You know, the organisational strategy really needs to be focused around using data if you're going to make the right amount of progress, because you need everybody on board. You know, this is a cross-functional problem. It's not a problem that belongs to IT. It's not a problem that belongs to finance. It affects all aspects of the organisation. So if you haven't got that sort of unifying drive from the top, it's very, very difficult. So that's the first thing. The second thing I'll say is, you know, just expanding on that a bit further, the cross-functional nature, you know, means that this is not a problem that's going to ever be solved by IT. It's not ever going to be solved by finance. It's not ever going to be solved by risk and compliance. It needs a collaboration of all aspects of the firm, and you need a structure, a process, and Martin and Chris have both sort of touched on this in order to bring those together. Otherwise, it's going to be really difficult to make progress.
Thank you. Yes, so Martin and Chris, it sounds like you have given very much thought to those two areas that Graham just mentioned, sort of, you know, ownership of it at the highest level, and I think Chris, you talked about, you know, championing, and also that you know, that it's something that obviously crosses different areas of the business. It doesn't belong in just one part, even if there is a centralized team for some of the activity. What are the challenges that you are both actively dealing with at the moment in terms of the journey that you're on, Martin?
There's never enough hours in a day, you know, and there's always a desire to move, you know, quicker, further, and achieve more. So I guess it's about, you know, whilst also getting the buy-in from the top, as Graham was saying, for me, it's also about, you know, creating appropriate expectation management. It's about staging things to be done at the right time, you know, in the right place along the road, and it's not trying to bite off too much all at once. And, you know, it's better to, you know, to take these things in a staged approach that will deliver pieces of value along the way, and to celebrate the success of that each piece of value that you create, whether that's, you know, direct revenue, cost savings, or just a perception value that you know, whether internally or externally. You need to keep celebrating your wins.
Thanks, Martin. Chris?
Yeah, so I agree with what Graham was saying there about it's imperative that it comes from the top. If, you know, for lots of reasons, but one that comes to mind is just making sure that we have the time for training. It's obviously, you know, not chargeable time, so it is important that comes down from the top, that we're able to invest in our people in those sorts of skills, and also time for innovation. You know, a lot of our day, as Martin was just saying, is, you know, there's not much time in the day, and everything is like normally around delivery of operational demands, but having that time ring fence for innovation obviously needs buy-in from the top. So that's something that I would, one area that I think is a constant challenge. Something else I'm forming at the moment is a pan-DACB data council. So getting representatives from every practice area of the company to actually attend and start to kind of agree with like cross DACB priorities with regards to data, whether that's data management or governance or different strategies that each different practice area might have, because every practice area has different needs and is on different levels of their data journey. So that kind of central place is an important step, I think.
Is there also an element of needing to prioritize as well then?
Absolutely, yeah.
People together to discuss what their individual goals are. Presumably that might be a tricky element too.
Yeah, and prioritizing, not only things that we want to achieve in terms of new deliveries, but also ongoing issues as well, or migration of systems, things that happen that need to happen. Yeah.
Thank you. We have had a question come through. This is from James Skies. James, I'm sorry, I don't know which firm you're from, but the question is, what are some of the more novel / unexpected sources of data that you've started to integrate with and use, which has either helped in terms of your internal decision making or in terms of adding value to clients? Are there any sort of particular data types that stand out that you weren't using but you are using or you're investigating using?
Yeah, I got one. So this is still in our innovation space at the moment, but in terms of starting to use some different type of data. So we've been working in our subsidence team, and we've sourced some data of longitude, latitude coordinates and geospatial coordinates of urban trees, for example, in the Greater London area. So we were able to then plot all urban trees in Greater London, cross-reference it with prior claims that we have seen in subsidence areas, and then cross-reference that with, for example, census data around age of housing, soil types, etc., and to be able to build like a risk app for subsidence claims. So that was something that goes a bit further than just your average case level information, which was quite good.
Yeah. Thank you, Chris. How about you, Martin?
So I think when I think about this, it's what I start to think about is the way in which we've started to bring data from different parts of our business together in a way that we've not done so before, in order to answer different problems. So it's the sort of the questions around what is trying to understand what the behaviours of people are sort of post-pandemic returning to the office, and what's the impact or not of hybrid working. And so it's about combining data from our facilities function around people's movements. It's around sort of looking at finance around their productivity. It's around looking at our IT function around the use of different applications and systems, and looking at that data in to sort of see if there is any ebbs and flows. So coupled with HR data to see where people are working, full weeks, half weeks, part weeks, that sort of thing. And it's understanding and bringing that data together. But we're only been able to do that once we started to develop those communities and that collaboration that I was talking about across the different data experts that used to exist in silos. It's being able to sort of answer questions, we talk about multidisciplinary basis, but it's about bringing the data assets as well as the skills and the thinking from different disciplines across to answer different questions in the business. I won't go into any more detail as to what we found or didn't find in that regard. But those are the sorts of those abilities, I think, to start to integrate existing data sets that previously didn't integrate or mix.
You anticipated my next question there, Martin.
No, am I? Sorry.
That's right. No, I mean about what maybe you found from the exercise, but no problem. Graham, what you work with firms across the market. What stands out as particularly innovative to you in terms of how firms are harnessing different types of data or new types of data? Or to James, James said unexpected sources of data.
Yeah, so I'm going to answer this from a perspective particularly management information, because that's what we're focused on. It's improving firms, helping firms improve the operation of their business. And I think rather than novel, what we're seeing is trends of people actually utilizing more obvious data that's been there for a long time, that probably should have been used for a long time, but that has been siloed. So pulling together information around new business. So, what was previously the marketing team's data, where did our clients come from? What's the cost of acquisition? Information that heads of certain teams are maybe holding around the process, the cost and profitability of certain types of work, regulatory risk associated with those. And then the people side of things as well, your internal people, your advocacy, your engagement, all of that information gives you a more holistic view of the health and the viability of the firm as a legal business. And we're seeing much more of that happening now than we were 3, 4, 5 years ago, as people are pulling all these areas of data into a single place where the management can actually get a good overview of what's going on.
Bringing that idea back over to Chris and Martin, if you're able to, within your spheres, what sort of internal processes do you think that your firms could move the dial on fastest or furthest, that you may want to, or that may arise if you invested in you are investing, but if you carried on up the data maturity spectrum, are there processes that are ripe for improvement with management information? Chris?
So I think that integrating, so our centralized trustworthy data sets, for example, I think the next step for us will be, it's not really management information, but is integrating it into our other systems. So looking for business efficiencies there and how data flows around our company. Automation is obviously going to be a big growth area in the coming years, and data is central to that. So I would say probably our biggest challenge now is going to be automating a lot of our processes, data flows around the firm, and making our lawyers' lives easier, I would say.
Thanks, Chris. Martin?
There's a long list of things here, but fundamentally the answer is yes. I think processes is the start really of these things, and we're in quite transformational mood at Kennedy's at the moment. So we're looking at workspace transformation and how our buildings work for us, because that's what people are doing following the pandemic. But we're transforming data as a foundation to transforming digital. We have an AI transformation strategy now being developed, and I'm involved in that as well. And you'll understand, the conversations that are happening around the industry around that. So we're also looking at process transformation and service transformation in the business. These are all things that are then connected by the way in which data will flow through those processes, and it will start to engender a change of behavior across the business. But you're gonna have to take people on that journey, right? That transformation works by being imposed, and so as a data is the start really of organizing that stuff through, so that we're able to it becomes an enabler to the business to achieve its other aims, and that's data transformation isn't the thing to do, it's the foundation thing to allow other things to be done.
Thank you. A couple more questions from people watching. They're all popping up now. James has a follow-up. Chris mentioned analysts adding narrative to the data. Is that an essential aspect of using data to make decisions? I suppose good decisions, as it's very easy to misread what data might be telling us. Is that the thinking there, or is it more augmenting it and accentuating it?
So yeah, I mean, it kind of depends on what data you're consuming. I think, if it's a very simple, decision, black and white decision based on the KPI, then obviously, you don't need the narrative. But in terms of when I referred to it earlier, it was like adding context to our clients about what we are seeing in our data. So not just providing them with the information and a bar chart showing things going up or down or whatever, but actually digging into the data in a lot more detail and explaining that to our clients. It's although we can have an element of control about the data literacy of our company, but we don't have control over the data literacy of our clients. So we find that adding that narrative helps people to consume the data and any insights that we have gleaned from the data. It also enables us to add, we're obviously not sharing data to clients from other clients. So it does allow us to add some context to the wider market data that we are seeing internally. So that's something where I think it's important to add that narrative to place the data in a wider context.
Okay, thank you.
I think just linked to that, Richard, and I think this is, this goes back to what Chris was talking about why the data literacy across the organisation becomes so important, because all of the lawyers then, and the partners engaging with clients start to become your analysts in that sense, and it's that the subject matter expert's ability to understand the data, to then translate that to the client, is the bit that adds the real value. It's the why. The data and the bar chart or whatever will show you what. Somebody will need to explain what the what is so that people understand it, but then actually the real skill and the real value is driven by somebody adding the why this happens. And this is where the data teams need to then work with the subject matter experts. We do exactly the same in our technology business about embedding the subject matter experts together with the technologists when we're developing product. So that we make product that works for clients. That's how we call that, legal baked in, if you like, to our technology product. But the same approach will exist in relation to the data outputs that we create as businesses as well. It's about baking in the legal expertise alongside the data, the analytics, because the what being explained is great, but the why is the real the piece, the icing, if you like, on that cake.
I can just come in on that as well, Richard. It's not just in terms of the data that's client facing. So in terms of your internal information, so much effort in so many organisations goes into production of data, into extraction of data, and there's virtually no value actually added through that process. And the value is added by the commentary, and the value is added by the person responsible for that area actually giving their narrative, as we said here, around it. And that's really where time and effort needs to go, not in the extraction. So that's where automation actually has, provides huge benefits in these areas.
Thanks, Graham. Thank you. David Jackson has a question too. What systems, tools, or techniques are you using to categorize and label the data so it can be retrieved and analysed by platforms at a later date? We've only got a few minutes left, so that probably might be quite a big question, but I don't know if you could take it on in a minute each, maybe. Chris?
Sure. So we have a number of different methods, but one that we have used recently to a certain degree of success is using Time Extender, which is a modern data warehouse that has a data dictionary kind of embedded in it and metadata embedded in it. But we're also looking at running a trial with Purview at the moment, and Microsoft Purview is part of the Azure platform. So that's things are moving fast in this space, but I think that is the area we're gonna look to investigate next.
I'll leave that to technologists to answer on my part, but I think that the beyond that, we are also developing it's a data catalog so that we understand where are all of our data and what data exists where, so that we're able to understand it, know it, find it, and we're actually building those catalogs ourselves within the data team using open source technologies which are adopted by governments around the world, including UK, US, Canadian governments. So these are sort of well-trusted open source tools that are able to use to allow people to understand better what their data landscape and data asset looks like.
I think, thank you everybody. We're at the hour, and we had a very wide-ranging conversation there. So there were a couple more questions here. We'll try to get answers to them if we can do, and get those answers across to you thank you for submitting them. And yeah, thank you for joining us today for this session. My thanks to Martin, to Chris, and of course to Graham at Kennedy's, DAC Beachcroft, and our partner Katchr, respectively. And I hope you'll join us again for another briefing webcast soon. Thank you.